Dr. Jazz.
I just wanted to start
Jazz.
since I mentioned Dusan, my musical brother from Serbia, guitar player. I saw you guys are doing something new together again, and I wanted to ask you, like, how did your story with Dusan begin? Actually, I mean,
yeah, well, it was well. First of all, I'm really thankful that I met him because I really like Dusan. I think he's an amazing musician, one of my favorite guitarists ever. But I met him through a guy by the name of Leonardo Pavkovic.
Oh yeah, from Munjun.
Who is who is the Munjun, the guy behind and above and underneath Munjun Records. And basically he hooked me up with him and Vasil Hadzimanov to do this session back in 2016, I think. And we did this session in Spain in a wonderful studio near Barcelona called La Casa Morada, and that was the first Moon-June session that we did there. We did a consecutive yearly session residency over the years until the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
But he was there in the in the first session. Sorry. And I met him there, and funny thing happened when we started to play, me, Vasil, and Dusan. It's from the first note, and we had never rehearsed before. We just met in the studio. From the first note, it felt like we've been playing for like 35 years or something.
Oh wow!
It's one of those things that really rarely happens, and since then, every opportunity I get to play with Dusan and Vasil, or either one in any other combination is a blessing for me,
Yeah.
So they both of them really feel like musical brothers in a way. So
I love both of them. I played with Vasil in August. We did something, and it's
nice.
He's also amazing. I love him. He's such a master of keyboards also. So beautiful that you hooked up with the Balkan connections.
yeah. But I grew up in Israel, so there's that connection there too.
Yeah, it goes. But otherwise, I wanted to ask you. I listened to and I read about Solar Flash, which is your You've been extremely, I think, prolific as a band leader throughout your since way back, and I wanted to ask you, how did this new record come about, and especially how did your connection with Gary Husband, by the way, begin, and when was that? Because he's one of the giants of fusion music also, and I mean Kevin Glasgow, amazing on electric bass also, but like how did this group happen, and the story behind the new record? I mean,
well, I met Gary in '98.
Oh wow, already.
It's a really funny story. I was still living in Israel back then, and I would, in Israel we have a famous festival in Israel. It's famous, called the Red Sea Jazz Festival.
Yeah, sure, I know it. Yeah.
And I would go and play there every year with different bands. And the last year I was there was '98, before I left Israel, and I was playing in the summer of '98. And before that, I spoke to the organizer of the festival, and I told him, "Man, why don't you bring Alan Holdsworth?" Me, I was young at the time.
Oh, wow.
I'm a really Alan Holdsworth fan still.
Yeah. Same here.
And I don't know if what I said affected him, but I think it made him think. And that year in the summer, Alan came with his trio, and Gary was there. So it was an amazing opportunity for me to meet him, because Gary, of course, he's a master keyboard player, but one of my if not my favorite drummer on drums in that style of music. And it was an amazing opportunity to meet him. And it was really a funny story. Maybe I shouldn't tell it, but I'll tell it anyway. So here's the thing. The year before that, and I was still young. I was like in my 23, 34, or something like that. I was like so much into Alan Holdsworth. I went and transcribed all the drum parts of Alan's.
Seriously?
Yeah. Including Gary, obviously, which was one of the most prominent drummers with Alan at that time, or at least, since the time they both in Bradford, in north of UK. And so I said, okay, I'm just gonna give it to him. So I remember I waited in the lobby of the hotel there, or in I can't remember which hotel it. I think it was the Dan Hotel or something like that. So I'm waiting in the lobby for Gary's husband. I didn't know if he's coming. I just wait there with these transcriptions under my arm, and lucky for me, there he was, and he arrived. And I immediately jumped up and said, hey, Gary, my name is Asaf. I'm a local drummer here. I'm playing with another band. Here, look at this. I made transcriptions of you. And, obviously he didn't expect, a nice Jewish boy from Israel to do that kind of thing. But since then, we've been in touch. And, when I immigrated to England around 99, like mid-99, of course, I was in touch with him. And I did a few gigs with his trio at the time, piano trio.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Really? Oh, wow.
He was playing piano. He had a piano trio. And Gene Calderazzo, the drummer, London drummer, used to do that regularly. But sometimes I would get a chance to do that trio when Gene was not around. So, we got to play, we got to clap a little bit, we got to hang a little bit. And, I kept in touch with him, obviously, ever since. And also, he came and played on one of my older albums. Not the old album, just as a guest, back in 2008, I think, an album called The Monk. Mm-hmm. And so he played on that a few numbers, and that was great. But back to Solar Flash, to your question. Again, Leonardo Pavkovic was organizing these yearly residency recording session at La Casa Murada Studios in Spain. And he said that Gary will be there, and so I've asked Gary whether he would be interested in playing some of my music again, and doing this time a full album. And I'm very happy to say he said yes, and he agreed. Wow. And we went over there, me and Kevin, and did this album. And it was a wonderful experience, actually. The first piece on the album is called Kinship. Yeah. And that was the first piece we played on the session, on the first day. And I named it that because that brotherhood feeling in the music, we seem to be speaking the same language, and, Kevin Glasgow also, he's been a huge fan of Alan Holdsworth for many, many years, and he knows everything. I've listened to inside out all the Alan Holdsworth stuff. So for both of us, it was great, and it was like a huge celebration, musical celebration for both of us. And from the first note, that's what it is. And something I was thinking while we were recording, I was thinking, especially in the States, people refer to the jazz, when somebody is playing jazz, they refer to it as jazz language. That term is flying around a lot. Yeah. And I've always felt, well, I wouldn't say out of the loop a bit when people talk about jazz language, but just a little bit on the side, so to speak, and not fully engaged in that kind of realm so much.
Yeah.
But when me and Gary and Kevin played, I realized, wait a second, we are also speaking a language. And Gary was, some of the stuff that he does on the keyboard kind of resembled, there's like a ghost of Jan Hammer, here and there. And there's a few things that, me and both me and Kevin, we know this as our language, but I never thought, okay, that's what it is. It's the fusion language, or the jazz rock, the electric jazz language of the 70s and 80s. And it was interesting realization, actually, in the studio.
Yeah. You have a nice sound. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's like you said, all three of you. I mean, Gary having played with Alan, and you listened to Alan, of course, makes sense. It's really gelled together. It's even more, your previous records already. It's like, with Mike Outram, the early ones. I love Mike. I mean, he's such an underrated player, and I discovered him, and he has this Holdsworth note also somewhere there. So I think you have this throughout your music. But I love that. Yeah, it's so beautiful that you hooked up with Gary, and hopefully we'll see you on the road somewhere, to play.
Yeah, it was really a gift for me that session kind of landed, landed into my hands, and I said, okay, I've got to do that.
Yeah.
So Gary was there, and I wrote some stuff. I've got like loads and loads of tunes, like a backup, huge drawer full of tunes, and I drew some old ones, made some new ones, and we just went for it. Yeah, it was amazing.
How do you do with the music? I mean, because when I listen to your compositions, even from previous albums, it's like a lot of, a lot of odd meters, open places, but it's like sketches, or is it like, I have the idea it's like sketches, not really that you leave a lot of openness. I mean, how do you approach a composition or writing for someone? I mean, for this group, let's say particularly, how did you envision this?
Well, primarily when I compose music, and I know that you are also a prolific writer yourself, but when I sit down to compose music, for me, it's first of all, it's sound. That's I'm looking for. Sound is the musical term, but maybe the technical term would be vibration. I'm just looking for a combination of notes. Usually, with this comes from harmony. A combination of notes that will give me a certain vibration, a certain vibe, basically, a certain atmosphere, if you want, that I'm after. And so I'm looking for that spirit behind the notes, all the time. And that's always where I start. So I never start with a rhythm or a melody.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Wow.
So like for me, there's these three things in music that we all say that this is music. You have melody, we have rhythm, and we have harmony. The rhythm is like the pulse, it's like the heartbeat, it's like the energy, the perpetual cyclical energy of life. And the melody is the story. You go from A to B, you tell a story with the melody. The harmony is something different, and that's really where I feel my my inclination is.
Wow, interesting. Wow.
So it's more about finding the harmonies that will evoke certain emotions that I'm after. And so I guess, by the way, I'm completely, when you ask me about any like theoretical knowledge about how to write those chords, and I know nothing. I'm completely imbecile when it comes to the actual theory of nice voicing. What is this chord? Don't ask me, I don't know. So I go for that area of music, usually that's what encourages me. And so you said the word space, so space has a lot to do with that as well. Okay, because I always felt that space has more information than the notes that we are playing. It has more. It has more. You can learn more from the space what to play next or what to write next than the actual notes. So I never say, okay, I've got an idea, let's try to develop it. I try to just find a nice place vibrationally, a nice vibration signature, so to speak, and just to start from there. And if something comes out of it, great, and on a good day probably, and most days nothing comes out of it. So I just leave it in my huge drawer of I don't know how many thousands of tunes, and do nothing with it until maybe at some point one of these things will get used at some point. So in a way, what I'm doing is I just write. I don't try to finish a piece. I just try to write as much as I can, on a regular basis when I'm not touring, obviously, and then leave it there. Yeah. So in a way, every day I'm sending a bottle with a time. It's like a time capsule. I'm sending a time capsule every day, and one of these days, one of two of them are coming back to me, and I say, oh, okay, that reminds me that thing that I wrote 6 years ago. Then I go back to the files, and I say, okay, maybe I can join this to another thing that I'm doing. One of the things I earlier on, in my 20s, I read this book. I always forget the name of the author. He's a really, really famous jazz pianist, New York guy. The name of the book,
Kenny Werner.
Kenny Werner, Effortless Mastery. I can't remember, and I read it when it came out. So I can't remember whether he said this in the book or he said this in one interview or something like that. He was explaining how to write music. And he gave like a method which I use to this day, basically, which is basically very simple. You just write every day that you can, and don't worry about finishing anything. Just finish it anyhow. Write for the trash can, basically.
That's a good one, actually.
Yeah, and basically I've got many trash cans full of many different tunes that never got used and will probably never get used.
Yeah, but you're not stuck then. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is with me, maybe, because I'm not like, there are people who are professional composers, who that's what they do for a living every day, all day, who have maybe other routines or other ways of working on this. So I know that a lot of composers, and I try to do this to some extent, try to always write something else that they never wrote before, or to try to write maybe a choral, or try to write something that you never tried before, and it's an amazing thing. Or write for an instrument you never wrote before. I tried it a few times, and so usually with people who compose like that, the palette is much more varied than my own. So the thing is with me, I guess because of that method that I'm using, I'm actually sometimes writing the same piece again and again and again, which, that's what it is. But, I'm happy with that. And I've got a lot of tunes that I'm happy with, and lots more that I'm not happy with. But, that's what it is, and this,
it's like a novelist. Or a poet, he has his style of writing, but he writes different novels, or stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the same.
Yeah. Kind of the same. I like that.
No, it's good what I mean, like this process of just writing down ideas, because we are then sometimes stuck with ending. You write, like, you compose and you write like an A section, and then and now what? And then, like, you're frustrated, you don't know where to go. And if you're thinking just like that, okay, I'll leave it and let's see, maybe I use it, maybe I don't even use it, so I think that's a nice way to be creative and without this burden of finishing.
Exactly. Yeah, the thing is, Samo, I think that the mind is very busy, and some of us have very, very busy mind. Some of us don't, but it is keeping busy and keeping us busy all the time with thoughts and stuff.
Yeah.
So in a way, that method from Kenny Werner works for me, I guess, because I am tricking the mind not to think too much about the process and not about the process. I'm not thinking too much about the result.
The result, yeah.
The result. So I'm just in the. So it kind of it forces you to kind of be in the moment, which is something that I definitely find. I don't know how you find that, but the mind very rarely wants to be in the moment. It's always what's next, what's been. So it's really, I feel I need to trick my mind in order to get to a place where creativity can start. If creativity comes or not, it's like, it's like going fishing. Sometimes you get the fish, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you get a big fish.
That's a good one. Yeah.
You get a little one. So, it's in a way maybe I'm saying we, but maybe me, I feel like that.
We have to learn
trick
this.
My mind. Yeah.
We have to learn this, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's the way I've been writing music for a long time now. I mean, in my older albums, I have, the way I've written is always, okay, I've got an idea, now let's try to develop it. So I try to develop an idea, like you say, okay, I've got an A section, what about a B section? Let's write a B section to fit that. And it kind of fit, and it's like, it's a tight fit, and it's like not as comfortable and as natural as when you just write something that comes out from pure creativity. And that something can be just a 4-bar riff, and it's enough.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The thing is like this, and I see that with a lot of students of mine who are trying to compose. If you have just 3 seconds of magic.
Yeah.
In the music that you wrote, or in the whatever you played in a solo, if there's this is like just that 3 seconds of, it's enough.
Yeah,
it's enough. And then yes, you can play that B section that you fitted over, or that riff that you fitted over, but it's really all about those 3 seconds of magic that happened during the song. And most people, when they hear those 3 seconds, they say, I like this piece, I like this solo, I like this tune, because of a very short moment of little magic that happened from that effortless place, Like, that book is called Effortless Mastery.
Yeah. No, but also if you have musicians like Kevin and Gary, it's like very easy. Even if you give them like 7 notes, that's a melody. They will make, or you will make magic out of it, because it's just, your creativity is really on a high level. So it's maybe sometimes even it's easier not to complicate too much and just like, okay, do your thing, and it can be
sure.
Really
I mean,
fun,
it's always been my approach to when I'm working with musicians that play my music. Always to give them the, especially during the solos, the freedom to choose the sound they want, the approach they want to take, completely. I mean, when I write, I have to say that when I write the actual heads, the melodies, the tunes, it's all written down, including voices and bass notes and stuff like that. So I like to be a bit more specific about that. Again, because of that, I think the voicing of a chord, the voicing in a harmony has a big meaning, especially for me, they have a big meaning in terms of the vibrational signature of what you're trying to say within a musical piece. So I write them almost like you could say like classical music. But then in the solos, it's up to them to interpret the melody or the tune in any way they wish.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, to give that, and in this way, you also have like this full artistic freedom. You as a band leader and the people you play with, I mean, because they're more free, right? Just one question here. I've read this new album is like on your label or under your production, Stonebird.
Yeah. I've got a record company, which is called Stonebird Productions. Sorry for the lame name. I couldn't come up with that. Something better. So that's all I've got. It was produced with association with Moon June Records. Yeah. So lots of the recent albums in the last 5 years were produced like that. It's under my own label, but it's created with association with Moon June Record, and also Moon June Record are doing the distribution and promotion and stuff. It's kind of a collaboration, really. Moon June Records is not really your orthodox record company contract kind of thing, kind of thing. It's just basically me and Leonardo just trying to do some stuff together. So a lot of the formalities are not there. It's just me and Leonardo basically trying to put this music out. That's it.
That's important. Just, I mean, that's in the end, to people to hear it. I mean, that's really important. I just wanted to go, Asaf, a little bit back. I mean, you mentioned Alan Holdsworth, and when I listen to your music, it's like you mentioned, a lot of fusion. So, but I hear McLaughlin also a little, or Mahavishnu sometimes. But what were the triggers when you were growing up in Israel? What inspired you actually to go into this direction of fusion? I mean, we're talking about, I guess, early 80s when you kind of dug into this. So what were those bands? And do you remember the moment? I mean, I remember my moment when I first heard Pat Metheny's group, The Road to You album. And I was like, I didn't know what they were doing, but I wanted to do that. And do you have a moment like this, or what? How did this story happen with you?
Well, I was really lucky to grow up in Israel at a time when financially, relatively speaking, we were in a good place. So what often happens when we are in a place of time of plenty, so things that are usually down the priority list go up, like culture and music and stuff like this. So it was a really good time to grow up as a teenager. When I was, I was born 1969. So when I was teenager, when I was let's say 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and even onwards after that, we would get big touring bands. So, Chicoria Electric Band, one of the first tours that they ever done. I've seen them. And Mahavishnu Orchestra, the VSOP Quintet, Miles Davis, Weather Report. I've seen Weather Report when I was 14, when I was 13 maybe, so I was, and my sister was really a big music fan. No, that
not
was
with Jaco anymore, right?
Already.
Yeah, with the
no, that was right after that. So they had a album called Procession, and that was the tour of the album. 84, I think. So. Or maybe 83, I can't remember. But anyway, my sister was very much into music, and she listened to a lot of stuff that was way, way, way beyond my head at the time, like ECM artists and all the current stuff for the jazz in America and Europe. So from one hand, you had the ECM movement of mid 70s and onwards, and from the other side, you'd have the jazz from America, which at the time was jazz rock or electric jazz.
Yeah, sure.
So that was the whole thing. So she was listening to all this stuff, and I was just drinking all that stuff and trying to absorb that. And then when all the big bands that we heard on the records came to Israel, came to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or whatever, she would take me with her, a little boy, 12 years old, 13 years old. She would take me to all these great big concerts, and we saw, as I said, we saw Miles Davis.
Miles, what, with Schofield and Stern? That lineup?
I can't remember the band.
Probably,
it was really, really long time ago. Probably.
Yeah, sure. But probably Stern,
but all the great big bands of the 80s, basically. And I've seen lots of them, and that's how I got so fired up to start this kind of thing. And I guess that explains where I my inclination to electric jazz or jazz rock, or fusion, you want to call it. With Alan Holdsworth, back to your question, with Alan Holdsworth, he never came to Israel, at least at that time. Or not that I know of. If we would have, I would be there for sure. But when I was about 13 or 14, I had a good friend, bass player, that I played in my school band with, and he brought an album called Road Games.
Oh yeah, and, with Gary Willis, I think. Yeah.
No, it's Jeff Berlin.
Jeff Berlin, this one.
Jeff Berlin, Jeff Berlin.
Okay. Metal Fatigue. So, Sorry.
That's Gary. So I heard that album and I was like completely blown away. Like it just took me completely. I was blown away completely. And since I was 13 or 14, I've been listening to Alan, and from that time, you know. And that's really my introduction to that kind of music. But again, he's not someone I've seen live until I came to Europe. Oh no, actually, before I left Israel, I've seen him with Gary in that festival I mentioned earlier. But it was like a complete connection. And again, it's those harmonies and that sound and that. Everybody is playing a lot, is very busy, but there's some certain type of space there that I really like.
Yeah,
and still like. So, it was a complete revelation for me with Alan. Yeah.
How did you learn then? Did you then start transcribing all these drummers and music? How did you? Because you played drums by then already, right?
Yeah, I was already playing drums, not to a very high level, but I was kind of a beginner. Basically, I started when I was 12. But I was playing for a year and a half or 2 years, and then I got to know Alan's music. And of course, when you're playing when you're that young and playing only 2 years, all that stuff, you just don't understand how people do this, how people can play like that. So it took me a long, long time until my early 20s. A long incubation time, you can say. And as I said, okay, I'm going to try and figure out what's going on. And then I just sat down again in my early 20s, and I've transcribed a lot of that stuff, or everything that was released up until then.
Wow.
I think it was about 7 albums or 8 albums, something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah, that's how we learn. I mean, that's what we all did. I transcribed like 60 or 50 solos by Ornette Coleman. I loved Ornette, so I was obsessed. I was like, all these guys, and I see. I really connect with this. I mean, this idea of listening and transcribing. That's the best way to learn.
For sure, yeah. Especially at that young age.
Yeah, exactly.
When you are, it's a very formative time for everyone, and it's the right stuff to get into at that time, Especially, I have got a lot of students, and I often tell them, if you want to transcribe something you really like, don't transcribe, someone who you think you should be transcribing. Just transcribe somebody you really, really like. So you really get something out of it. And I'm sure you can say, and I can hear it in your music, whatever I've listened to, that Ornette Coleman thing, that for me, that put a lot of things together, listening to your stuff. Then I know where you are coming from, like that, because of that.
I think that's important what you said, like transcribe what you like. I also tell this to everyone, to every student, like, don't worry about what the others expect. Also try to follow your thing, even when playing. It takes you a long time, man. I mean, it's just like, I'm a huge Bill Frisell fan also, and like this minimalism now lately, and for a long time, I was afraid like playing a G chord or something, because it's not jazz. And then you see all these great artists, and it's like, wait a second, you can't do that. You can do whatever, and that's so important that we realize this at a certain point, that we can do that. And it's
I guess it comes back to the idea of guidance. We need some kind of guidance from somewhere, from someone at that formative age. It's a need. You need that, and I try to be there for my students. I mean, I'm not asking them to transcribe me,
but I know what you mean.
But just to tell them, to just point them, hopefully, to the right direction, which is what they want to do. That is the right direction.
Exactly. Not to copy and find your own voice. I wanted to ask you something, Asaf, because one of the first records I had of you with you on, I heard, was Orient House with Gilad Atzmon. And it was basically right after you moved to London. And
a few years after, yes. It was Orient House. Was this the first album, Orient House?
I think it's 2000.
2000. It's right when I arrived to London. Like maybe 6 months after.
I wanted to ask you, what was your decision or trigger to move to London, and how was your reaction? I love hearing this when people move to New York or move to London and trying to become part of that scene and trying to get gigs. And how was that process with you? I mean, and how did it develop?
Well, it was an amazing process for me to make that move. Initially, basically, I came to Europe first. In '98, I moved to Rotterdam.
Oh, really?
In Holland,
Oh, really?
With my then girlfriend, later my wife, and we're no longer together. But and I moved there initially because I had some friends over there, and I had some work, like touring and stuff like that.
Oh.
And she didn't like it at all. And she had some friends and family in London, and she said, let's just go and try to see what London scene is like. And I said, okay. So we took the bus from Rotterdam to London.
Wow.
Like a 12 hours bus or something like that. And then we got to London. I remember somewhere, like in early morning, like 5 a.m., and I start to see all these bricks buildings and that kind of gloomy London vibe. And say, exactly. I really want to live here. But we stayed with a friend of ours, communal friend of ours, and then I started to check out the scene, and and people were extremely nice to me. and people say, okay, you're from Netherlands, come and sit in with and I was sitting in with some people, and people were really very welcoming. It was all very welcoming. And Gilad Atzmon, who you heard, the Oriana House Ensemble, I didn't know him, although he's originally from Israel.
Yeah.
Israel is a really small place, but Gilad Atzmon was probably the one of the only people I didn't play with in Israel. In Israel, everybody plays with everyone, no matter what style, no matter, because everybody plays everything.
Like Slovenia,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a small place, So a friend of mine, who is a friend of Gilad, gave me his number, and I called him up, and he said, okay, come over. And I came to see a gig of his, and I sat in with a band, and then I came over to his place, and we jammed a little bit. While in Holland, it seems to be all very slow and very difficult and not so welcoming, I have to say, at least at that time.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of being a foreigner and stuff like that. I have nothing against Holland, but
yeah, sure.
I didn't feel so welcome as maybe other people would. But then the total opposite was in London. It was like, hey, come over, tell me who you are. Let's try and do something together. Let's try it. And I remember, actually, that was the thing that made me think, okay, we're moving to London. I went to go and see a gig at that week when we just checked it out. And I went on my own, and I went to what was then the old Vortex Club. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, sure. I know Vortex.
Yeah, it's the old Vortex, like maybe 2 or 3 other addresses before
okay.
It is now.
Okay.
And I was looking, I couldn't find it, and the buses are all very complicated, and the streets are all going like this. And I've asked somebody who looked a bit like, okay, maybe he's a beggar, or it looked a bit dodgy. And I asked him, do you know where the Vortex Club is? And he said, sure, it's over there, and you have to go. By the way, where are you from? I said, I'm from Israel. I came from Holland. Oh, wow, welcome to London. And he took my hand and shook my hand, and I was like, yeah, sure. But he took my hand and said, welcome to London, like this. And I thought, okay, that's a sign. And then a few months after that, I still had some work to do in Holland, and also I had to do some stuff in France as well. I worked with a theater group back then,
okay.
And then we moved to London, and that's how I got to London, basically.
Wow, interesting. Wow.
And then I knew already Gilad from that week that trial week, but whatever. And then we started to play together. I used to just come over and play in his front room. He had a nice piano, and we would play with loads and loads of people. He would give me, he would be already kind of established by that time in the UK, played a lot of gigs and stuff like that. So he would give me names and numbers of different jazz musicians on the scene.
Wow,
and I would call them up and would say, oh, would you like to play? We are organizing. And I would organize these plays in Gilad's front room. And, I didn't have a car at the time. I used to travel with the drums on a baby trolley I found in the garbage, it was horrible. But anyway, those sessions were really great. And I got to know a lot of people. I got to really start to play jazz, because in Israel there wasn't yet this kind of notion of, okay, you play jazz, you need to learn Charlie Parker and play standards and stuff like that. It was not so much like this at all. Now it's much better, because you've got a lot of educational institutions and people and also the internet, of course. But back then, so I was doing other things, playing like this weird fusiony Alan Holdsworth free jazz / whatever you want. But then when I go to London, doing all these sessions with these different people I called up, then I started to really understand, the art form a bit better.
Interesting.
So yeah, it all started from that. And then Gilad, at certain point, I think it was in 99, a few months after I came to London, he already had a band, like a trio or quartet already. And he just called me up one day and he said, would you like to join the band? I said, of course, man, would love to. I was obviously skinned and couldn't pay my rent and all this kind of thing, just arrived in London. And he said, okay, take your diary. And he gave me about 55 gigs in the diary,
Oh, man. Jeez.
And from then on, it was like just one-way street. I was just playing almost every night for the next 10 years, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Wow. That's a good start and a good story to start with. Yeah, in London. I mean, is this how did then, because you played with Gilad for quite a long time, like 10 years.
Yeah,
12 years,
almost
right?
10 years. Yes. Yeah.
How did then, because in between you started playing with Tim Garland. I mean,
that's also, right. Yeah.
How did this story with Tim happen? I mean, I listened to the other day to one with Ant Law and Jason Ravel. Man, that's such a killer. Some tunes there. That's some Eye for Peace and some others. Like it's just it's killing. But like, how does this story with Tim happen actually then?
Well, I met him, I think, around 2005 during one of the gigs that I've done, surprise, with Gilad, which Gilad basically kidnapped me, and nobody ever saw me ever again. I was playing with Gilad for a long while. Sometimes we'll do 150 to 200 gigs a year, with that band. He was so prolific,
But only UK or all around Europe, or also like?
Mostly UK, but we
really?
went to East Europe many times.
Wow.
And finally, we went to West Europe as well, and also other places, but mainly in the UK, UK scene.
Wow.
And then he came and saw one of the gigs that I've done with Gilad in, I think, Marlborough Festival. It was 2005. Around that time, and then he just took my number and he called me up a few weeks later and he said, oh, I'm going to do this new band with this really, really young talented piano player called Willem Simcock.
Oh man. Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, it took me about 8 months to understand how to spell Willem, but anyway, I very quickly understood that he's a pretty amazing pianist, even at that age. He was basically Tim's ex-student at the Royal Academy of Music in London. And so we started this trio together. And he called it the Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, yeah.
Lighthouse Trio. So we went under his, it was his own band, basically, with solely his own compositions. And later on, we played for a number of years, maybe 6 or 7 years, and then
it's a long time.
In the last 2 years of the band, we made it actually like a band, like Lighthouse Trio, like the band.
Yeah.
Him and Willem, he was basically the most prominent composer in that band. Willem also composed. I composed a little bit, not on the albums, but I composed a little bit of the stuff for the band, and that's how it all started. And since then, Tim has been kind of incorporating me to many other projects that he is doing. So, I've been really lucky to work with him in this one project band, and now we are going to do, when I come back to London right now, is going to do this Vigil tribute band, like
really?
With Chico. Yeah.
Oh wow, man!
He played with that band with Chick for many years, and now that Chick sadly passed away, he's making a tribute. So we're gonna do some stuff, but many other things, recordings, one-off recordings, tours, big band stuff. We've done a lot together over the years. And Tim is just such a prolific musician, especially writer. That's basically how I met him, and it's been quite steady work with different projects with him over the years since then.
But you've done all this Gilad work and Tim Garland work and bunch of others. I mean, when you check your discography, it's amazing. It's like how much you've done. But you started immediately when it came to London. The Inner Noise, like I mentioned, Mike Outram already, and Steve Lodder. How did this band then happen when you came to London? Because you immediately became also a band leader already in London. I mean, you started pushing it or continuing. I mean, I'll put it like that, being a band leader.
Yeah. I mean, I had the Inner Noise band already back in Israel. We started 97, and at that time I had a band with Israeli musicians. But then when I came to London, it's like, okay, now I have to find new people because I cannot bring the guys from Israel to play in London. So Mike, I met because Gilad booked him once for a gig.
Oh, really?
When Frank, our pianist player, Frank Harrison, couldn't make it one afternoon, I think. And I listened to Mike and I said, oh, wow, I'd love to play with this guy.
Yeah.
And I met Steve Lodder through a communal friend of ours who had this kind of African music band called Afro Blue, and so he played in that band, Steve. So I met Steve, and Steve gave me an album that he did with a duet album he did with a saxophone player. Sorry, I forgot his name.
Oh, Andy Shepherd, right? No,
not Andy Shepherd. He played many years with Andy. No, he did another album. It's a duet album in a church with Steve playing the church organ.
Oh, I'll check.
And I said, wow, okay, church organ is what I'm looking for. So, you don't find a church organ organist in a jam session in London. And he's a great guy and a fantastic, amazing musician. And I loved his musicality and his, the stuff that I've heard him on. And so I had Steve and Mike. That's how I met them around just before 2000.
Yeah, wow.
And we came together and we started to work on this music because, this music was not your ordinary organ trio.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So we started to work on music and we recorded a demo, and then I tried to get some gigs. Nobody wanted to book this band. Then I managed to hire some place and do a couple of gigs, and then we did the album, the first Inner Noise one, in St. Michael's Church in Highgate in London, we did another two albums after that. We Are Falling and the song Within. It was great. It was a great experience. I mean, I love that sound.
It's quite unique.
Yeah, but nobody wanted to hear it at the time.
Sure.
And I could not get a gig, basically.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating. Also, as a newcomer in London, maybe when you have a little bit more reputation or somebody heard about you, they can say, okay, he's got this crazy thing, maybe we'll give him a chance. But it was very difficult to the point that I was just sitting all day, every day, and just not getting any gigs, anything. So,
that's heavy.
it was difficult. It was difficult, and we did a few gigs out of UK.
Oh, really?
We did in France and just in Spain. I think we did one. But very sporadic. It was very difficult to book that band. The thing is, for me as a Jewish boy from Israel, the sound of the organ, the church organ, has been such a fascinating thing without the baggage, and I understood it later, without the baggage of the religious dogmas and the religious institutionalized thing. I didn't know even about anything. For me, it was just the sound. And again, it's the sound. And, the sound of the organ is so rich, and I was so mesmerized by the richness of the overtones. And it really said, okay, you just do a little chord, a 3-tone chord, and all this stuff comes out, So that really resonated with me a lot. But I didn't realize back then that there's a lot of baggage coming with that sound, which is cultural, religious,
connected,
and so on. So I think that scared off a lot of people. Plus, when I started to play with Gilad, and it was the Orient House Ensemble, so, people thought, oh, Asaf Sirkis, he's that guy that play with Gilad Atzmon. Maybe we should book him, and he'll bring a belly dancer as well. So, and of course, the music that I was composing was very different than the music that we did with Gilad, which was more like, you could say, a combination of very rooted in jazz, but with a lot of
dancey almost, in a way, when I hear
Middle Eastern thing. More, I guess, more in the later albums from that band. It was very, very Middle Eastern and stuff. So that's the thing, it's the old thing. When you are coming from a country, I want to hear something that I don't know. Maybe you can bring from that country. And I'm coming from a country and composing music with something that has nothing to do with that.
Exactly. True.
It has nothing to do.
True.
And so it was, to say the least, was difficult to get anywhere with this band. Unfortunately.
I can imagine. Cool. Asaf, just one last question, not to take. Sure. I know you're busy later, but we mentioned Jeff Berlin before, and I read somewhere that you played with him and Larry Coryell, and I tried to find some footage, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Like how did this story with Larry and Jeff happen? Actually, I mean.
It started actually because, my friend Gary husband, during, I think, 2005, had some serious back issues. And he had been scheduled to play with Larry on this tour in France and Germany back then. And he couldn't do it. So he recommended me to do that tour. And I did that tour. It was not with Jeff. It was Mark Egan on bass.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Mark Egan.
Wow, beautiful.
So that was an amazing moment for me, just to get a chance to play with Larry, because, one of the gigs that I've seen back in Israel was Chicory and the Electric Band, and it was a double bill with Larry Coryell, Bob Moses, which I know you had on the show, which later became my teacher.
Really? I'm having a tour with Bob Moses next year, man.
Fantastic, man. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a soul, man. I love Bob. And so I think it was Miroslav Vitus on bass.
Oh, wow.
So that trio. So I got to play with Larry. Because of this thing that Gary couldn't do the tour, so he recommended me. So I did the tour.
Wow.
Long story short, Larry was kind of happy with my playing, and he said, okay, would you like to do some more gigs when I'm in Europe? And then he would call me up to do some European gigs. And some of them were still with Mark again. But we did a tour, again, I think again in Germany or France or both. with Jeff, and that's how I met Jeff. And later on, Jeff called me up to do his quartet, a few gigs with his quartet called the Bessa Quartet. So originally, Peter Erskine is playing on, or was playing on, and beautiful. So that was great to play with that band.
Yeah,
it was an amazing experience. Yeah, with John Abercrombie on guitar.
So, really?
Yeah.
Oh man, you played with John also then in that group? Oh man,
in that
because
band,
he's one of my heroes. I mean, I always
He's a hero, of mine too. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's so beautiful.
He was an incredible guy, by the way. I really enjoyed just hanging out and
I've heard that.
Talking to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
Asaf, thank you so much. I'll not take more of your time so that you can chill and continue the day in this early jazz fusion hours that we're doing this.
Yeah. Actually, I gotta start packing up because I'm going on tour tomorrow really early, and I have to do a lot of things today.
Sure, but yeah.
Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.